The Princess and the Human, Chapter 31, Thank you. That would be all. You may leave, I still have to prepare everything for tomorrow. Kikla gave Kyla a trained smile. The borrowed maid bowed in response, Of course, milady. And don't worry, I'm sure the negotiations tomorrow won't be cancelled. Hearing that, the Taistri matriarch looked up. What was that supposed to mean? After the arrival, an ambassador would be given 1 day to get settled, which was today, and afterward, the negotiations started. Those were the proceedings the members of the alliance had agreed on. So what was that maid hinting at? Why would it be cancelled? Oh, haven't you heard? Just this morning. The princess surprisingly cancelled all her appointments for the day. Has she now? That was indeed surprising. The fickle king and queen, sure, they would do something like that on a whim. Princess Silvani though, she was a diligent, hardworking, and reliable person. As much as Kikla didn't like her, she had to give her at least that. Do you know the reason? Only the official one, unfortunately. It's apparently due to a personal emergency. Oh my. I hope it's nothing serious. As I said, I'm sure she won't cancel your appointment tomorrow. If whatever this emergency is were to last more than a day, she should know that and would have contacted you. Kikla shook her head. I don't care about that. The average trade negotiations last for at least 10 days, before both parties even start to get somewhere. One measly day won't make an impact. No, I'm more concerned about her. If she does something so out of character, something grave must have happened. Your forbearance is admirable, milady. But, if you excuse my directness, there are certain standards to be upheld. Certainly, the matriarch agreed. But she's still just a person. I'm sure she had good reasons for her actions. A few moments of silence followed. She probably had, Kyla finally said with audible bitterness in her voice. She always has. After she left, Kikla turned off her translator, but still waited a few moments before she addressed her assistant. Your friends sure were right about her love for gossip. Indeed, Kilo agreed. Though I'm sure the fact that she isn't exactly a big fan of the princess and her relative progressiveness contributes to that, true. But still, those are interesting news, don't you think so? Because you might be able to claim delay? Now, don't make a sacrifice before you're done praying. I will of course make the claim should she actually cancel tomorrow, but I'm not betting on that. Living on a different planet was taxing, even if your host provided for you. That in turn meant that longer negotiations put the host in an advantageous position. For that reason, delaying the talks was considered ill-mannered. However, a delay of a single day before the negotiations had even started wouldn't give her much leverage. I'm far more interested in that personal emergency of hers. Do you have an idea what it might be? If it had something to do with her, it wouldn't be just 1 day. The only thing greater than the princess's diligence is her compassion for those dear to her. So, you walking dossier, what people in her life are important enough to her that she would be willing to anger the nobles she was supposed to meet for them? Her assistant thought for a moment. It depends on what exactly happened to that person. But as far as I'm aware, she still hasn't chosen a partner, and none of my friends mentioned any changes in her social circle. So I can only think of her parents and her brother. It's her brother then. If something had happened to the king or queen, everyone would know that. That wasn't good. Albeit slim, there was still a chance that the young prince would inherit the throne, especially if the princess was out of the race for whatever reason. The boy would be a king way easier to manipulate than Silvani, which was only in the Taitri's interest. Contact your friends and see if they know something. If the prince's condition isn't too serious, we might be able to use this as an excuse to finally talk with him, something his sister so far managed to prevent. She leaned back in her chair. There seems to be a lot on the princess's mind right now. Must be stressful to be her. And people, even competent ones like her, are prone to make mistakes when under stress. For days after the hospital visit, Silvani was sitting in her room, a wide screen displaying her brother's face in front of her. They don't allow me to move at all. They say everything I do could injure me. Tomorrow they want to do some surgery, though I didn't understand what exactly they'll do. Not much besides that, so yeah, it's boring as hell. Hell? Silvani asked, slightly confused. What is hell? No idea. Nadine always says that, guess it rubbed off. I see. The doctor said they'll bring you to Birminar soon. Yes, in 11 days. Maybe it'll be less boring there. They are better equipped to host patients over long periods. Also, mother and father will probably be able to visit more often than I am. Kirteen shrugged, had a call with them yesterday. Consisted mostly of father explaining that he was searching for the culprit and what he would do should he find them. Have you told them about Nadine? She asked with a queasy feeling, after that oration. Nah. I figured since they don't know yet, you haven't told them. And you probably had a good reason. That's surprisingly reasonable of you. Since when do you care what's best for others? Since now. Besides, I kind of like the idea of a secret friend. While hearing that was a bit of a relief, she still wasn't sure if she had made the right call back then. Also, was that last sentence something she should worry about? It's time for my checkup, so I have to end it here. Speaking of Nadine, could you get her on as well next time? I'll try, Silvani promised. Immediately after the call ended, she called for Dr. Githay. Anything new regarding Nadine? She asked, once the doctor entered. Normally, something like this wouldn't be part of her duties, but since she worked so much with her, Githay had sort of become the go-to person for everything that regarded Nadine. That she cared as much about the small alien as Silvani did contribute to that. Still the same as when you tried to talk to her, the doctor answered dispirited. The door is always locked, and the only thing she says is to not come near her if she answers at all. Does she at least eat? Yes. When the servants leave her plate at her door, she takes it once everyone is gone. I would have liked to examine how adding the meat she gathered to her diet would affect her body. Well, she eats it, so at least Kabut seems to do a good job, she sighed. You know, Your Highness, the servants are surprisingly fond of her. They seem no less concerned about her than we are. So they tried to wait in front of the door, but to no avail. It's like she always knows if someone is there. Because she does, Silgavani explained, remembering the conversation she had with her a while ago. She can hear us breathe. Breathe? How sensitive is her hearing? A knock at the door interrupted them. Yes, excuse me, Your Highness. His Majesty, your father called earlier, but you were busy talking to your brother. Does he want me to call him back? The maid shook her head. No need, he left you a message. Do you want it verbatim or should I paraphrase it? Depends what exactly you mean by paraphrasing. I mean leaving out some obscenities that were probably caused by a state of emotional agitation. How many? She spent a while looking at her datapad. A lot, I see. A synopsis will suffice then, she nodded. Very well. Your father informs you that he was able to bring the individuum who harmed Prince Kirteen to justice. Huh? That didn't sound good. Could you elaborate? Yes. After you met him at the hospital, His Majesty sent an investigation group to the forest, who found the illegal garbage dump shortly after. Wait, there really had been someone dumping their waste there. He also sent the investigation report, which I allowed myself to skim over. The investigators found the origin of the waste to be a company called Gatry Materials. They are led by a noble called Gatmer of Clan Gatry, the third child of Marquis Gatiron and Marchioness Alton, who own the land around the forest. They claim to not be affiliated with their son's company and to know nothing about the waste. Further investigation showed that Gatry Materials produces chemicals that are primarily purchased by pharmaceutical firms. However, about a cycle ago, one chemical that made a large portion of their revenue and that I'd prefer not to attempt pronouncing was no longer requested. Due to a new trade deal, his customers switched to a different chemical that produced better results. Said chemical gets imported from Svegplia and can't be produced on Homi. Unable to make up for the loss in revenue, Lord Gatmer tried to cut costs. He decided to save money with waste disposal, switching to a less expensive, but also less legal method. Once she heard of this, Her Majesty immediately pressed charges. Silvani tilted her head in surprise. My mother? Shouldn't a duke suffice as a judge? If it had been just about the littering, then yes. But since it allegedly caused your brother's injuries, only either of your parents can be the judge, or I, Silvani quickly said. Since I was given authority over all foreign affairs, I also outrank my brother. Father and mother would never act impartial in this trial. What date is set for the hearing? As long as there was no decisive proof that Kirtine was harmed by specifically this waste, which there wouldn't be unless this guy somehow had accidentally synthesized human sweat, she could say there wasn't enough to prove him guilty. The hearing already happened, the maid stopped her train of thought. Just the littering would have meant a fine, but since Lord Gatmer allegedly endangered the prince's life, he was sentenced to death. His parents tried to appeal, but he was executed on the spot, so they were too late, on the spot. What about the waiting period? In agreement with His Majesty, the Queen decided to not grant him one. A short silence followed, which was then broken by the doctor. The nobles won't like that, presumably, the maid agreed. As she left, the doctor again turned to Silvani. Your Highness, with all due respect, and in the awareness that I'm technically overstepping my boundaries, is there something I should know? There is, Silvani answered after a pause. But could you also step out for now? I need a moment.